So good evening and welcome everybody to the ISM New Jersey November membership meeting. For those of you that don't know me, I am the president of ISM New Jersey, and professionally, I'm a global head of professional services at CSL Bearing. Um, we've been very successful in hosting virtual meetings since the onset of the pandemic, and that is possible because of the due diligence that the planning, the resources, the time that our team is graciously offering us. And on that note, I'd like to thank our board, our committee chairs, volunteers, trustees, and Kathy Perna for their dedication. This is our last membership meeting of the year. I really hope in the next year of 2022 that we're going to resume in person. At least we're planning for the February as the in-person meeting. I think I just broke the news too early. Hopefully everybody's going to be on board with that, but that's our plan. We want to slowly bring us back into our in-person mode, hopefully next year. So more to come on that. So as we continue on today's meeting, I'm going to briefly just touch upon today's, our final programs of the year, and then briefly talk about today's topic. And of course, you'll get to hear a little bit more from our speaker today. So, as we know, today's meeting, obviously focuses on AI and its impact and usage within the supply chain. AI is no longer the buzzword, but it is rather a strategic tool that all organizations should leverage. So more specifically, AI allows for end-to-end visibility, which can help optimize the entire supply chain. And if you pair that with the vast amount of data that companies are working with, AI can allow for more robust operations. So you will hear in depth on this topic from Marissa Brown. I will not steal Anu's thunder. She will have the opportunity to introduce Marissa. So just a quick reminder on our final programs of the year. December 2nd, we have strategies for negotiation. One size does not fit all. December 8th is Women and Empowerment Series, Forget the Fairy Tale. December 9th is Value Beyond Savings. And December 15th probably is the last program of the year. It's going to be Voice of Supply Chain with Jocelina Peraleta. Sorry if I mispronounced her name. So I just, before I turn this over to Anu, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday, happy Thanksgiving next week. I hope you enjoyed today's session. And with that, I will turn it over to Anu, our membership director. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. To introduce Marissa Brown, Marissa Brown is from APQC, and she will share highlights from recently conducted research examining the use of AI across the supply chain. The research involved 1,000 participants representing various industries, regions, and organizational sizes. So Marissa will focus on the current state of adoption of AI, value drivers, and use cases. She will also discuss the impact of AI on employees in supply chain, looking at changes in skills needed for future success. Marissa is a senior principal research lead, supply chain management at APQC, a supply and demand chain executive, 2020 Pro to Know, and Women in Supply Chain Award recipient. Marissa Brown is a leader in supply chain with more than 25 years of experience in business, research, writing, speaking, and consulting. Wow. Currently, she focuses on the in-depth needs of APQC's members in supply chain management and product development as she develops and oversees APQC's supply chain management research agenda. She leads APQC's supply chain team that conducts research to provide insights into benchmarks, best practices, and process improvements in supply chain planning, procurement, logistics, manufacturing, product development, and innovation. Marissa writes and publishes relevant content on APQC's resource library, the APQC blog, and third-party site. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, are you all seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for that very nice introduction. And because of that, I'm going to skip my own introduction and just say I am an ISM member of the Houston chapter, which is where I live, and have enjoyed the opportunity to speak at ISM World earlier this year and look forward to continuing to engage with ISM moving forward. So just a brief note about my organization, just to provide some context for the research that I'll be sharing. So APQC is a member-based nonprofit, and our members are organizations, companies, government agencies, most of the branches of the Department of Defense, 550 organizations around the globe, and we cover more than 45 different industries. APQC provides information, data, and insights to help organizations hopefully work smarter, faster, and with greater confidence. And as Anu said, we gather benchmarks and best practices, process and performance improvement, and we also focus on helping organizations with knowledge management. There are three main functional areas that we cover: human capital management, finance, and of course, supply chain. And we've been around for more than 43 years, helping organizations make best practices their practices. So as far as what I'm going to share with you today, Anu outlined it for me. I appreciate that. We'll take a look at applying AI in supply chain and then the impact of that on employees, the people side of the challenge. And as we continue to hear about supply chain in the news and all the external disruptions that many of us are facing, there are a lot of questions about what can AI do to help? And then when AI comes in to help, what does that mean for those employees who are there? So we'll take a quick look at that. Let's start with applying AI in supply chain. And as we understand, AI has the potential to assist with all aspects of the supply chain, from the ability to create self-adjusting supply chains to enabling your warehouse operations to self-optimizing processes. But let's take a look at how organizations are applying AI in supply chain. And this information that I'm sharing is based on data we collected in 2020. So last year, from 1,000 organizations across the globe, from all major regions, really taking a look at what's happening with AI, what's the current state, and what does that impact look like for people. So let's begin with the big picture. To what degree has supply chain adopted AI? And this chart is in descending order of adoption. So basically what you can see here is that the use of AI across the supply chain has moved from theory into reality, but for many organizations, they're still in the early stages. Only about 38% of our respondents are beyond the stage of piloting the technology, and they're in the highest operating and optimizing stages. And about a third are in the beginning stages of either piloting or currently implementing this technology. So we see that 4 out of 10 are just now considering or evaluating AI for adoption across the supply chain. So they're on the fence and have yet to really commit. So this might sound a little different from what we hear in the media. So in the research, we wanted to see, does this data kind of hide differences in adoption by the various parts of the supply chain? So we dug in a little deeper and we found basically the same story. Regardless of the function within supply chain, and we asked about supply chain planning, sourcing and procurement, manufacturing, and asset management, most organizations are still in the relatively early stages of adoption. About 1/4 of the respondents are in the later stages of optimizing or operating their AI across all 4 of these areas. So now let's look at the core of supply chain, what many people historically considered to be the entire supply chain, logistics and warehousing. So we thought maybe here is where we'll see greater pickup of AI. And not really. The percentages are fairly similar to what we saw in the other functions and across the entire organization. Only about 1/4 of participants are in the later stages of operating and optimizing AI. So it's really, I think, fair to say that across the supply chain, AI is not yet widely adopted or optimized. Now, the trend is definitely that there will be an increase as we move forward. I think that's one of the biggest lessons we learned from the pandemic, and that is that the trend toward automation sped up, right? When everybody suddenly had to go work from home, there was no option but to figure out how to enable remote work. And things that maybe took 3 years took 3 months at the height of 2020 and even this year in 2021. So we wanted to start to peel back the layers of the onion, if you will, to figure out why AI is not yet more widely adopted and not more widespread. And one reason we found has to do with the fact that for 50% of our respondents, AI has only been in use in a business as usual environment for 1 to 2 years. More than a third have had it for less than a year, and 13% reporting using it for more than 2 years. So again, thanks to the pandemic and all these other disruptions we've been facing in supply chain, or as someone said during the introduction, the fun that we're having, I think that adoption will be rapidly growing. There's the age-old question when it comes to technology of build versus buy. And although cloud computing and other developments like software as a service have changed much of the context for this answer, companies are still kind of struggling with it. And in our research, we did not find any consensus on the types of software being used for AI. What we did find is that there is definitely an appetite for customized AI software, which isn't really surprising. The largest group of respondents, about a third, is using custom software that was developed specifically for their organization. The second largest group, 30%, is using off-the-shelf software that they also then customize for their organization. And I would assume over time, as things get more sophisticated, we'll see that second number grow. And then after that, we saw fewer than 1 out of 5 organizations using just straight up off-the-shelf software with little to no customization. And fewer still are using custom software that they built in-house. And the caveat here for these organizations, if you choose to go that route, is you have to be sure that you have the resources, both financial, human, and otherwise, to maintain the software as well as build it. So then we stepped back and said, why are organizations adopting AI? It's not just a nice to have anymore. It's something that really is moving into more of the mainstream, but why? What are they hoping to get from it? And so the top reason we see is revenue growth from a shorter sales cycle, really reflecting the use of AI in sales and marketing. That's followed by customer satisfaction improvement and revenue growth from entering new markets or new customer growth. But the fourth driver is one that I'll touch on again as we continue, headcount reduction. And here, let me just pause. Are you all having any difficulty seeing my screen? Everything's
Nope,
still okay?
good.
Okay.
The screen is fine. You disappeared.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just noticed that I'm blanked out. Okay, well, as long as you
You
can
had
see
a
the screen.
flash that your camera was too hot.
Oh, let's hope it doesn't explode. All right. Well, the important thing is the slides, so that's good that you can see that. So in terms of headcount reduction, this is the one that really scares most people. In fact, it scares more people than the fifth one of reducing the cost of acquiring customers. So the fear of being automated out of a job is not a new fear. That's been around since the first technologies were introduced into the workplace, but it's a persistent concern, right? And as you can see, it does reflect the reality that many organizations are trying to do just that with technology. So interestingly to note, headcount redeployment is further down the list. It's in the 9th place on this. And I think that reflects reality, especially in a tight labor market. So I'll talk more about headcount and FTEs and all that in the second part of this presentation, but that's definitely a reason that some companies are looking to adopt AI. We'll see if that turns out to be the reality. So when it comes to looking at use cases, let's start with today, and then we'll look in the next 3 years. For now, the use cases people are seeing for AI in supply chain, The top one is connected IoT product design and development, getting AI basically to help with building better products. Second is field service and training with augmented reality. And this is a great mix of people and technology here. For example, some companies I've spoken with are using Glass Enterprise, which was previously Google Glass, which basically is the glasses that have a heads-up display on them that allow employees in the production or warehouse locations to see instructions overlaid in front of what they're looking at. The third use case is automated detection and response with sensor-based monitoring, and then connected products with intelligent assistance. So that's today's use cases. When we forward to about 3 years from now and look at what companies are hoping AI will help them to do, moving into the first place is connected products with intelligent assistance, followed by automated store operations and services, logistical workflow operation, and then in fourth place, again, is our field service and training with augmented reality. So we haven't lost that use case for people. Predictive equipment maintenance, active automated asset monitoring, content aggregation and extraction, and then customer insights and real-time response. So as we heard in the introduction, there's a lot of data facing our organizations, and AI does a terrific job helping us to make sense of that in ways that our brains just cannot process. So we asked people, what do you see as the impact of deploying AI in supply chain? And this is an open text question, and the more frequently an answer was cited, the larger the text on this slide. And one of the most common themes we saw related to how organizations are deploying AI in supply chain is the impact on time, providing real-time data access and monitoring, reducing delivery cycle times, improving time management practices, and so forth. AI is something people are hoping will help them to free up time, data analysis, process. You see supplier, delivery, supply and demand are all things that they think will be impacted by AI. I'm gonna try. Okay. So, there we go. So now let's talk about the heart of this research, which is the impact on employees. And as we've seen, that organizations are recognizing the wide range of applicability of AI for supply chain use. But that also means that its impact on employees and their skills is also wide ranging. Many organizations believe AI drives value through its impact on the number of employees needed for supply chain. And as we saw earlier, a reduction in headcount is a top driver for deploying AI. Some organizations also consider headcount redeployment to be a driver. But as AI takes on more tasks that were previously completed by employees, organizations expect to be able to reduce the number that they've got working in supply chain or redirect their skills to other areas. So let's take a look at the data on this screen and talk about this impact. Start by looking at the dark blue bars, which is the impact on employees in terms of the percentage change in supply chain full-time equivalent employees, so FTEs, which if you consider a full-time employee to be the equivalent of 40 hours of work a week, so we use that as a unit of measure, right? You might have two 20-hour-a-week part-time employees. Together, though, that's only one FTE, one full-time equivalent, over the past 12 months from when we gathered this data. And you see that organizations have not seen a lot of churn in their supply chain employees. And of course, none of this is surprising to us as our organizations are scrambling to enjoy the fun that we're facing right now with all the disruptions and all the changes that are in all the pandemic induced and everything else that we're facing in our supply chain. So what we see here at the median, which is the midpoint or the 50th percentile, it's the point at which half of the data is above and half is below. The organizations only had a 6% change in the number of their FTE supply chain employees over the last 12 months. So we also see the 25th and the 75th percentiles, the top and bottom quartiles, if you will. And we see that it ranged from 3 to 9%. So that's not a huge change overall. But perhaps more interesting is the fact that at the median, organizations are actually adding more FTEs as a result of AI than they are eliminating or redeploying. So if we look at the light blue, we see that, and compare that to the purple on the bottom of the slide, we see that at the median, not only are the numbers very, median 25th and 75th percentiles, the numbers are very similar. And what we see is that there's actually a 3% increase above the 25% reduction. We see 28% being added due to AI. And this is a little counterintuitive to the widespread expectation, right? That hope that people have that AI is going to eliminate tasks that are undertaken by employees and therefore eliminate the need for those employees altogether. So the key takeaway from this slide is that rather than replacing employees, AI is actually changing the skills needed by supply chain professionals. So it's not that people are being replaced, it's that the skills they need are changing. So what are these new skills? So APQC investigated the shift in skills needed among supply chain professionals. And as a result of the adoption of AI, supply chain professionals are taking on tasks that require more social and deep work skills. And deep work is a term coined by author Cal Newport for skills related to really focusing intensely without distraction. And AI is leaving the humans on staff to engage in work that involves analysis and insight. And technology is not a substitute for the relationship building skills that support listening to your stakeholders, communicating effectively with your business partners, innovating, thinking strategically about how to approach challenges. So the skills that supply chain employees need are shifting as a result of AI into this more social and deep work arena and really changing what we need. So communication and active listening are among the most needed skills. Supply chain employees have to be able to discern the needs of their stakeholders and their business partners, maintain positive relationships, and succinctly and clearly convey expectations. You know, there's the old saying about we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to be able to listen and observe more with our suppliers and with our other stakeholders to get a better understanding of what they are truly able to do and what expertise they can bring. Creativity and innovation are also among the most important skills because of the shifting nature of the modern supply chain. With supply chains being forced to address previously unheard of situations and disruptions, like the old pandemic here, professionals have to be able to identify novel solutions to keep the business running. And if we think back to last year, we saw alcohol manufacturers switching over to hand sanitizers, car manufacturers working on ventilators. People were bringing creative solutions to novel problems. And honestly, we need to do it again. We've got congested ports, we've got delays and shortages and blockages. And it's really time we got creative and tried to solve these problems. Because if we keep in mind the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We can't do that with our supply chains. We need to try new things. We need people who can be creative and innovative to deal with these problems. And related to innovation and creativity is the ability to think strategically and solve complex problems. So AI can use data to predict shifts that are necessary for our manufacturing operations and our planning. However, the technology should support smart decision-making and problem solving by the employees. And that's where the employees' skills become critically important. We need our supply chain professionals able to look at evidence and make the best decision for the business, especially in situations that we're increasingly facing where there may be no evident right answer. And how do we teach these skills? That's a question we get a lot, because these aren't always the typical skills taught in business school or in a supply chain major. And a lot of this has to be learned on the job through scenarios and scenario planning, real world case studies, mentoring with experienced employees. There are ways to help employees develop these skills. And despite the overwhelming need for strategic and relationship building skills, supply chains also still need employees with more technical skill sets, like in data science and analysis, because those skills are going to be necessary to adopt and maintain and support AI within the supply chain. And we see the skill needed for the ability to extract insights from the new technology or the new systems and interpret the results. We need to leverage the data we have versus collecting even more. More and more data is not the answer. Leveraging the data we do have will help. And other skills that we want to see employees develop as a result of the adoption of AI include things like agility and flexibility to adapt to change, as well as security management. Because if there's one thing, there's probably only one thing we know for sure, but if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that change exists and change persists. And we will continue to see changes throughout our supply chains for, I'd say the near term, but also the medium term and the long term. That's the one guarantee I think we do have. So when we look at the percent of supply chain FTEs that required skill changes, we're seeing that AI is driving the bulk of the changes that are needed. And there's only a 5% difference in terms of FTEs who had a skill requirement change for any reason, and those who had a require skill change specifically because of the adoption of AI. But as we see these skills changing, the good news is that employees are not out there on their own. We see that companies are investing in their professionals and that they are working with AI in terms of providing time for training and development to help employees keep up. For upskilling and reskilling, companies are providing support regardless of industry. And we looked at this data across industries, and at the median, organizations are investing in 7 days of employee learning per employee to ease this transition. And more than half of the respondents, 55%, said that they feel like AI is actually helping to shorten the number of days they need for learning. And if we think back to some of those use cases for AI, it can impact how training is delivered through the use of Glass Enterprise and other similar kinds of tools that weren't available before. Not only are organizations providing time, they're also adjusting their learning budgets to ensure that employees get the skills development they need. According to our research, AI accounts for about a 30% change in learning budgets at the median. And organizations are budgeting for the costs of upskilling and reskilling. Now, while you only see $148 at the median, and that's pretty low per employee, some of the budget for this sits in HR versus in supply chain. And that's actually one of the best practices we have found, bar none, when it comes to developing supply chain employees, and that is to partner closely with the HR function. Because while supply chain has its ear to the ground and knows what skills are needed, HR professionals are the experts when it comes to developing skills in employees. So marrying those two sets of expertise can really help employees improve their skills in terms of adopting AI. So looking forward, just some information on the organizations that were in our research. As you see, it was a diverse set globally. We had different regions represented, number of different industries, different sizes, different business to business versus business to consumer or hybrid organizations in the mix. We had a lot of different organizations coming together for this research. And the impact of AI in the supply chain is only going to increase in the coming years. And with 40% of organizations currently considering or evaluating the use of AI for supply chain, there's a good chance that a company will be adopting it soon if it hasn't already. And the key to retaining employees who are going to thrive in the future in supply chain roles is to ensure that they have the right mix of skills to support this technology and leverage it strategically. And many organizations have already committed to providing learning opportunities for supply chain professionals to develop or enhance those critical skills. And although AI does not deliver the reduction in headcount that some companies believed would come with it, retraining prevents skills shortages and is a smarter investment than trying to hire all new employees with the new skills needed. And APQC really encourages organizations to consider employee learning as part of the business case for investing in AI. And I do have some content available. I'm happy to share these slides, and you all could link to those from our website. And if you have questions, feel free to contact me. And I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Kathy and Anu. If anyone has questions, be happy to answer those as well.
Does anybody have any questions? You can, if you don't want to do it live, you can put it in the chat. But if anybody has a question, now would be a great opportunity to do that. I do want to mention that I was actually in a earlier conference today, and that was actually what Dr. Eloise Epstein was actually mentioning too, is the training is like the key to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody has any questions, please, put it in the chat, or you can come off speaker and ask live. This is a great opportunity. Oh, I have one from Deborah. Do you see larger versus smaller organizations taking on AI more?
Oh, that's a very good question. So what I think is happening more and more is AI as a concept, or AI as a technology, is becoming embedded in a lot of the other software that we purchase as organizations. So you may not necessarily moving forward be implementing AI per se, but you may be implementing an order management solution that has an AI engine embedded in it, for example, or a procure to pay solution, or an order to cash solution. So by using some of those vendor provided packages, I think smaller organizations will be able to take advantage of AI in ways that they couldn't previously, because it would definitely have been a budget breaker.
Thank you. Any other comments out there? Or do you have it? Oh, let me see. Oh, another question came in. What was the average investment dollars for AI from the research findings?
That is a good question that I do not have the answer to.
Oh, okay.
We did not ask people that directly. And part of that, I think, has to do with if it is embedded in other tools or other technology, it's hard to kind of split out the costs. So unfortunately, don't have the answer for that one.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
A comment is APQC does have information on systems costs for the major parts of the major processes within supply chain, but not exclusive to AI. Like, we would also include costs for things like robotic process automation, which is increasingly common, and so forth.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay. Do you have any closing thoughts on the topic itself before we end this program?
I just want to say thank you to Kathy and to ISM New Jersey and the representatives from all the other ISM chapters. I appreciate your time, and appreciate that you all stayed on. I realize it's after 5 o'clock for many of you. And I'm always happy to talk more if you have any questions. And I'm happy to share the slides as well. And I know Kathy's going to share the recording to your site. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Thank you so very much. And I'm not sure, how did you want to share the slides? Through your website, or did you want to share them by sending me a PDF?
I can do it both ways. I can share the link, and then people can download it straight off of our site. That might be easier than emailing out a big file.
That sounds great. I would appreciate that. That would be great. So once I get that, everybody, I will be then sending out an email probably tomorrow if we get the information, if we get the link in time. I can then send that all out to everybody tomorrow. And but I thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. For those that is still early afternoon, others it's the evening. And thanks for joining us for this joint membership meeting, we're going to call it now. It's a joint membership meeting. And thank you all for joining us, and have a great holiday, everybody, too.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You too. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.